time to focus our attention closer to the field, or at least this is, what we're projecting as we start diving into the NFL draft. Last week, myself and Raider Jim, we talked at length about some of the defensive players. This week, we're going to be talking about some of the offensive players, and it wouldn't be fair to a lot of the other offensive players to not speak about the quarterbacks in whole, because that has been most of the news on the offensive side of the ball. If you have been following the draft, essentially the 4 to 5 quarterbacks, it's a big question of how many will go. Will all of them go? Will only 2 or 3 of them go? But the 5 I'm, of course, referring to: CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and Hendon Hooker. My question overall, or actually 2-part question, is this this quarterback draft class more quality or quantity over quality? But which one of these players excites you the most, if any? Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors to start us off.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I sat and read several sites going over everybody's top 10, and there were a lot of similarities with each one. But the one thing that I found, one of the common denominators was, you got past the top 3 or 4 names, and all the dialogue started to be, going to be a good backup, going to be a strong backup, but it wasn't going to be, they're going to be a great starter. And so quality over quantity, yeah, it's if you believe what you read, then it sounds like, yeah, we've got all these quarterbacks, but there's only 3 or 4 that might see a starting shot in the very near future. The guy I like out of all of them is Anthony Richardson, the kid out of Florida, 6'4", 244. The guy's got an arm and a half. But the other thing I like about him, what I like to read about him, is very, very smart and strong in the pocket. Well, if I'm 6'4", 244, yeah, go ahead, come at me. I don't care. And he's extremely athletic. So get around the edge and imagine one of those 5'11" defensive backs standing there, and this guy's running at you. It's going to be a nightmare. So I do like Anthony Richardson. I do like CJ Stroud out of the Ohio State. Another kid, accuracy, reads the field very well. It's almost like he's got an extra eye in the middle of his forehead, like the old Twilight Zone show had. Levis isn't bad, but again, Levis is the kid out of Kentucky, 6'4", 229, good arm, needs to have the experience with professional coaching. I'm not criticizing the coaches or the staff from Kentucky by any means, but they didn't run that great pro scheme. He's going to have to get smarter that way. So if he's coachable and he can learn, he might turn out. My long shot out of the bunch is Tanner McKee, the kid out of Stanford. Another one.
I like that guy. I like that guy a lot.
231. This kid,
yes.
And even I forgot to jot his name down on my list. Stay Pac-12. That kid out of UCLA is not half bad either.
Dorian Thompson, yeah.
Yes. I can see him.
Dorian Walker, something like that. Yes.
Yeah. Now, I would love to be on the Bryce Young bandwagon because I think he's a hell of a player. I really do. But even now, the last 2-3 years, when Mahomes walks up behind center at 6'2", 220, maybe 215, I look at him and think, boy, he's really kind of small, isn't he, for a quarterback? And you think you're going to put Bryce Young out there at 5'10" in his cleats, and he's going to be able to see over the lineman? That's a real challenge, I think, and it's too bad because, again, great player, heck of a player, but I think the size is really a liability at this point. I was looking back, okay, older than both you guys by a big stretch, and it's like, well, I had to look up. I don't think Fran Tarkenton was a big guy. Fran Tarkenton was 6 feet tall. He was 6 feet tall back in the day when there weren't behemoths, at every position. But 6 feet tall, even he was always considered small for a quarterback, small for an NFL guy. So good luck to Bryce Young. Maybe they can turn him into something else besides a quarterback, but I think that's a big gamble.
Yeah, for me, I do think it is quantity over quality. Maybe one of these guys can fit somewhere and have a good career. I just don't know which one it is. They all have their strengths, but they all have pretty glaring weaknesses, at least in my mind. And once again, I always will, acknowledge my biases, and I will acknowledge that over the last few years, I haven't been very good at, prognosticating or projecting quarterbacks in there. And I'll even, throw one example. I really did think Mason Rudolph was going to be a good quarterback, and I missed that one terribly. But anyways, looking at, essentially CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, these two, most people kind of are, the 1-2s or 1A, 1B, if you will, depending on who you're talking to. Now, obviously, the Bryce Young situation, he was listed, I believe, at 6'1" at Alabama, the combine. He came in at 5'10". And even the people who say, oh, well, even Drew Brees was undersized. Yeah, well, Drew Brees was 6'1". And believe me, as someone who is under 6 foot, I can tell you there's a big difference between 5'10" and 6'1". So there is that. I do think he is he's a winner. He's a guy who's going to go out there. He's going to give everything he can. I just think that has its limitations. I'm sorry. We're seeing it now with Kyler Murray. They kind of got that figured out, and we've seen it with many other small quarterbacks. For CJ Stroud, he seems to check all the other boxes. However, it came out over the past, I think, week that his cognitive test was historically bad. And I believe this used to be called the Wonderlic test. For whatever reason, they've rebranded it. So I go back to Vince Young. I remember when Vince Young was coming out, he had 6'5", 220, could do everything on the football field, but he had a really bad Wonderlic score. And now obviously Vince Young didn't, amount to anything. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's because of the Wonderlic test or what the Wonderlic test entails. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying he was out of the league in 2 or 3 years. And most scouts talking about the CJ Stroud number, they've all said, look, you having a good score doesn't mean you're going to be a good quarterback, but you having a score like this pretty much does mean you're not going to be a good quarterback. And that's unfortunate, but there is going to be a team that takes a chance on him. We'll see what team that is and how high he goes. Obviously, Anthony Richardson, he was the combine king, maybe the greatest combine of any quarterback ever. He's really shot up a lot of people's draft boards. However, I look at his stats at Florida. They're not very impressive. And that's fine if you don't care about that. I do. He only had one full season starting at Florida, and even in that time he had a completion percentage of 52%. That's not going to cut it in the SEC. It's not going to cut it in the NFL level, that's for sure. And his touchdown to interception ratio last year was 17-9. Look, at the SEC level, I know they play against good teams week in and week out. That needs to be bumped up. His career touchdown to interception ratio, 24-15. That doesn't do it for me for that side of it. However, he is a physical freak. I kind of saw someone say if you take a gummy bear of Cam Newton and you just kind of swish it down a little bit, that's Anthony Richardson. He's not big, but he's a little wider than Cam Newton was. The other guy that really actually kind of jumps out to me, at least of these 5, is Hendon Hooker. He has the size and he has the stats. However, he's 25. And the question then goes, how much of a difference does that mean for a team? We're looking at, the Jalen Hurtses and the Joe Burrows and the Tuas. They're still in their 22s, 23s.
Is he also not coming off an injury?
I believe he is. There was an ACL, I believe, that did buff. Yeah.
That's the guy.
But in terms of the stat side of it, he's never had a complete, and this is a 3 to 4 year starter. I don't know the exact breakdown of it, but he's put in a lot of work at Tennessee, or at the college level. He's never been below 60% completion percentage. And over the last 2 seasons at Tennessee, he had a 58-5 touchdown to interception ratio. Once again, the age and the injury, I think, will probably drop Hendon Hooker, but I think whoever ends up with Hendon Hooker may get the best quarterback out of this draft. And I hope I didn't just jinx Hendon Hooker like I seem to always do. And then the last one I'm going to bring up is, of course, Will Levis. Look, the biggest thing that jumps out to me, and this is strictly personal and just kind of weird to me, is he's a really weird dude. And I'm not
mayonnaise in his coffee.
Yeah, mayonnaise in his coffee, and not only that, he eats his bananas with the peel on. I don't look. Once again, I do believe don't knock it till you try it. Except in these situations, I ain't trying it, but I'm gonna keep knocking it. Mayo in the coffee, that seems way too much. As someone who is okay with mayo on my sandwiches, and I love bananas, but I would never eat a banana with the peel on. It's kept me up at night how he eats the stem. But anyways, he on the field side of things, he did have 2 full years at Kentucky, and both times his completion percentage was north of 65%, which looks good. However, did throw 23 interceptions in a 2-year span. Oh. I don't know if that's going to cut it. Now, I will say they are a lower tier SEC team, but still, you're going to need more I'm going to need more at that level, at least protecting the football. So I would have to say Hendon Hooker, maybe at least in my mind, how I break it all down, would be the best one, but I'm not giving up a first round pick really on any of these guys. But obviously at least 2 or 3 of these guys will go in the first round. Coach, what are your thoughts on the quarterback draft class of 2023?
I think this is what everyone was alluding to when Michael Vick started to become Michael Vick and the change of quarterback started to happen. The offenses in college kind of happened, and then the NFL copied those offenses in college, and they got to get the quarterback or the athlete to play that style of offense. I think, us three, I think I know us all pretty well. We're all in that area of that prototypical drop back quarterback being 6'3" to 6'5", huge arm, good intangibles, runs pro style offense that nobody runs nowadays. Nobody knows what a pro style offense is, right. Whether it's the West Coast or just the I or whatnot. Those things aren't ran nowadays. And I think as GMs and scouts look at the crop of quarterback coming out and archetyping them with, their highly recommended offensive head coach, the reads aren't the same, but the offenses are up. The limitations of checkdowns are less than what they used to when we had that prototypical prospect quarterback like the Peyton Manning or even that Ryan Leaf guy. So the times, the positions, the schemes have all changed and tailored around these athletes like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, that whether he has the height or not, neither does Kyler Murray, but he's very athletic and can throw the ball down the field 70 yards once the wide receiver breaks, gets some separation from that defender, or Will Levis, who has a touchdown to interception ratio, but is just very athletic and does these things and has a huge arm, kind of like my guy up in Buffalo, and then you got you got to show some love to the 5th year senior, because there are guys like Sean Payton that are old school types that value the 4-year starter or that sometime 5th year starter in college that is a little bit more mature, so you throw in a name like Hendon Hooker. But and then you got guys that are like Anthony Richardson that just have outstanding characteristics, and the way these teams and owners and GMs and head coaches are more willing to gamble on the freakish athleticism of players and try to develop them. If not, trade them away or drop them. I mean, we're starting to hear that with Young over in San Francisco. The 3rd pick a couple years ago hasn't had a lot of time on the field, has got a lot of injuries, but they gambled on him. And I think more and more teams are willing to gamble on the stats or the characteristics of these athletes, that same kind of build and same kind of, statistical whatnot that they put up in college. But, everything seems to make this change for more and more speed, more and more athletic, more and more dynamic versus, like what we're used to as that prototypical quarterback prospect, so times have changed. I guess I got to start changing myself as far as how I look at these guys. I totally agree. Like 5-10 years, these guys are probably 3rd round and below, maybe except for one of the 5. And I don't even know which one of the 5 that could be.
Exactly.
But if anything, I like some of the names that were already brought up, like the Dorian Thompson Robinson or the kid out of Stanford. And I do like Hendon Hooker. He was one of the 5 that was listed or named. But I think the pressure being a later round drafted quarterback and the chance to develop and learn is highly beneficial. I mean, you mentioned how Anthony Richardson had probably the best quarterback combine in history. Well, I bet Tom Brady had the worst quarterback combine in history, right?
That picture did not do him any justice.
That picture did not do him any justice, you know? So it's like, come on, like, hey, if these teams are willing to gamble on that pick and that franchise and the money that they're going to be having to pay out to these guys, good. Well, it's not my money, so and I can't tell you how to spend it. You know, it excite your fan base, right? Excite the guys in the locker room because you know they're going to be excited too that you're picking up such a dynamic college football player and see what he can offer to the pro ranks. And you know, again, as schemes have changed, offensive and coaching hires have changed, you know, like it could be a fit. Maybe not for me, but I'm not making that kind of money or those kind of decisions. You know, I just get to share my time with you guys and I love it, you know?
Yeah. It's, you know, the way I look at it is a lot of this is going to come down to desperation. You're going to have desperate teams just looking to fill a void and be able to prop someone up and say, we have him. If I'm a GM and now for whatever reason, I've been guaranteed to keep my job until next year's draft and beyond. I collapse for Caleb, and I'm incredibly biased because I've watched Caleb Williams here at USC, but I think Caleb Williams checks all the boxes twice before any of these guys check the first one. But once again, if you're a GM, you don't really have a whole, you're not able to go through two drafts drafting in the top 5 and survive it. So it's easy for me to say, but keep your eye on that going forward. But yeah, we might see the best value come the two guys you brought up, or at least someone that isn't in that big 5 and someone is probably drafted on the weekend, not Thursday or Friday.